So who are we? First, one day we'll go back to actual in-person meetings. For now, just a reminder, Creed's is actually still open. If you've got dry cleaning, coffee, you want to pick up supplies there, they're running as a grocery store now. So,
Shoot.
we ran out of.
Sorry. Damn
We
it.
ran out of memory.
Uh,
Or
sorry, just keep on going. I'll fix this.
okay. Let me use my memory to think what the next slide is. So who are we at Volition? So basically, we are certified real estate investment advisors. We first and foremost are real estate investors ourselves. We've been doing this for a really long time. Personally, I've been investing in real estate for over 19 years now, which I guess makes me a really old dude. But we have done a lot of our own personal investments, and we've helped a large number of people become invested as well in real estate here in Toronto, in what I would say are excellent cash flowing, good tenant, risk mitigated investments. Next slide, please. So Volition team. So this is our new updated slide finally. Thank you, Shelby. So we basically cover the gamut of services. We've got advisory, which is exactly what we're doing tonight. It's mentorship, education, consultation, teaching people about how to invest in real estate. The next thing is realty services, and this is actually helping you find a property. And if you've been through the process of trying to buy a property here in Toronto, it's actually quite a challenging process, especially to find the right asset that actually makes sense, that actually gets some cash flow. It's quite a challenge. The next thing is design and renovation. This is building the asset that you desire. So oftentimes, we're creating what we want. If we're buying a turnkey asset, they do exist, but we're paying a premium for somebody else's work to create a turnkey asset. Sorry, for buying a turnkey asset. Oftentimes it makes sense for us to go in there and do it ourselves, create that asset that we want, and we can do that for you. We do everything from small renovations up to huge $1 million plus type renovations where we're doing multiple buildings with legal changes and zoning amendments and committee of adjustments and all that kind of stuff. So we're quite deep in that area. The next thing is management. So that's like once you have the property, what do you do with it? You lease it out. You don't want to handle tenants. We can take care of that for you. And lastly, we've got our operations manager, Shelby, who's joined the team a couple of months ago, but now we finally have a slide with her smiling face on it. So we do normal stuff. We always like to remind people that we do normal agent things. And this is actually touched on one of the questions we got earlier. It's really important if you're looking for a primary residence and you have ambitions to be in real estate investing to make sure that your primary residence lines up with your real estate investing goals, even if it's not a house you're going to use as potential investment in the future. Let's say you're buying a place and the kitchen is dated and you just want to know roughly how much it's going to cost to do a kitchen. We actually own a construction company, so we can tell you with some, pretty good certainty how much it would cost to do that kitchen. And there's few agents out there with that kind of knowledge. Want to go to the next slide? So this is just a shout out to people on the call. I think I added some folks today, but if we've missed anybody, for those of you who are active clients with us, so have gone through the process with us, we have a private mastermind chat group where everybody can get connected. If you're an active client with us today and we've missed you, please reach out to us after the meetup and we'll make sure you're added.
I do want to add, this is specifically and exclusively for clients who are under retainer with Volition and or who have firmed up a deal using our investment realty services. So I get questions, oh, can I get added to the group? Unfortunately not unless you're actually doing something with us. Okay.
Cool. So next thing is advisory. So this is, when Matt touched on early on about talking about goals and designing a proper plan for investment, this is really what this is. This is definitely our strength, and what differentiates us from just regular realtors is helping you figure out what the right investment path is for you. Is it there's so many things, and we're actually going to dive into some of the potential things you can invest into, but helping figure out what the right investment is based on your goals. I think when everybody starts out, they're all I need X number of dollars, I want X number of cash flow. But they don't understand what the investment that they're getting into is related to in terms of time, in terms of tenant profiles, in terms of headache, in terms of upkeep. And these are many other factors that make a huge difference on your real estate investing that need to be considered as you're going through this journey. And we always like to put this slide in here because this is what we tried to be. When we first got into real estate investing, it was an absolute maze. There's just so much to know, and so much that I knew I didn't know, but didn't even know what to ask. And that's really where we try to come in and provide the guidance to get you through the investing maze. Okay, so market minute. So I'm going to touch this only very briefly this month on what's happening. Sales volumes continue to be through the roof. It's a little bit down month over month, but if you'll see, that's consistent seasonally. So our strongest markets are spring market. I'm sure everybody knows that, followed by our second strongest market, which is typically the fall market, which will peak kind of September into October. So we'll expect the September numbers to dip down again due to seasonality, but I do fully expect, barring any sort of major second wave outbreak, massive shutdown of the economy again, October to be very strong. And you can see here in terms of what the sales are like historically, we are at peak levels again. Like the transactions that are happening are similar to what we saw happen through the peak in 2017.
So Vinay, your question was around, do you see rental prices eventually affecting housing prices and single family homes? There's just too much pent up demand, dude. There's so much pent up demand, and so even during this pandemic period, lots and lots of activity. So yeah.
The only caveat I'd add to that is it will, if it goes on for a really long time, right? If we see COVID dragging out for years, and major economic impact happening for years, yes, for sure, we're going to start to see that. I don't know what that inflection point is going to be, but I think we're still a little whiles away from that actually happening.
Don't get it wrong, I could see prices continuing to rise because the majority of people who are buying these things have high income jobs. The majority of them kept their jobs, but the problem is buying these and just expecting only appreciation is the same thing as gambling it, right? If rents continue to drop or stay low because the people who would live in them, like, every single restaurant or type of business in the downtown core, none of us are really back at our offices, or some, we've been told we're not going back till the end of next year, right? So a ton of those tenants who would potentially be there for units might disappear. And so if rents drop while prices go up, that, I know that's like, I think the name of this whole talk or anything like that. But if they keep dropping and prices keep going up, there is that inflection point of, well, why would you buy this if it's, 1% cap rate? You're just out of your mind.
Yeah, and you're absolutely right. Like, if rental prices continues to stay down and trend down for a long period of time, absolutely, right? Like, you can't have such a disparity between rental pricing and housing pricing, right? We don't have that arrow that shows the circle of life when it comes to influencing of population to rent prices to home prices, but they are all absolutely tied together. And Matt would be the first to tell you that rental prices guide home prices at the end of the day. But we'll see what happens with that. I think that's the hard part. That's the crystal ball part, as to what that inflection point is and when it will be.
We may be at the start of this right now. CERB is kind of coming to an end. So we may start seeing some impacts now, because right now, up until now, it's been propped up. So I don't think anyone can deny that. So that's the interesting sort of variable that we're going to see in the market now that CERB is coming to an end, and seeing how rental prices are going to fare and how real estate prices are going to fare. I think outside Toronto versus inside Toronto, you're going to see two different stories. Personally, that's what. But that's just sort of my prediction. I don't really have a crystal ball though. Okay.
Yeah. Well, we get asked, like, does that mean I shouldn't buy, right? Like that's the underlying question around all these things. We've always maintained that it's more about getting the right asset than it is about getting the market timing right, because you can never do that. But if you're getting the right asset that will get you the right tenant profiles, that gets you, if you're doing a BRRRR strategy, that gets you the high ARVs, that kind of stuff, bar none, matters way more than trying to buy around inflection points. That's just really tough to do. And as long as the strategy is long term, and you are in the right areas to get the right demographics to hold through the downturns, then you should be good.
I wanted to add also, as long as there's cheap money around, people are still going to be very incentivized to buy real estate. I think right now, my biggest concern is that the wealthy individuals who are qualified are going to be taking advantage of the leverage and purchasing what they can at very cheap lending rates, while the people who are maybe a little bit less fortunate will struggle to actually enter the market, especially in the next little bit. Like banks are probably going to be holding interest rates down for the next at least like year or two. The Canadian economy is not doing so great right now, so. It's, and also with the Canadian government still pumping money into the market, it's what's called cash or hard assets, right? And for me, it's like I see a lot of individuals like wanting to buy assets. Like maybe they're waiting for a dip, but a lot of individuals, at least the ones I know and working with me, are very bullish with the market. On top of that, it's like either buying these rental properties versus commercial properties. Commercial properties in Toronto are selling at like a 3 cap to 3.5 cap. These rental properties are still like hitting like a 4 cap, 4.5, maybe even a little bit more, depending on where you find, and if you're lucky enough. And a lot of these individuals who do own corporations or are self-employed are putting 35% down anyways. So they are actually cash flowing and not running a negative. Even the rents are depreciated by like 5-10%. It just seems like Toronto has a lot of money. Like if there's a dip, I think there's going to be a lot of very wealthy individuals snatching things up very quickly. I'm not too sure what's going to happen with the mortgage deferral program ending. It's people are kind of seeing things both ways, but it seems like overall the market's quite bullish, even though there might be a slight downturn with the deferrals running up, maybe.
Let's move on to the next slide then. So, one of the things I wanted to demonstrate with the new listings number is one of the differences in 2017 is high sales volume and high pricing was driven by low availability of product, right? There was a scramble to buy what was out there, and pricing went through the roof because there wasn't lots of supply. That's not the case with this market. There's actually plenty of supply. So we have high supply, high transaction, and high sale price all happening at once, which is a kind of a true move in the market then. On to the next slide. So we start to add a bit of information around average rents. So to our discussion earlier, Vinay, the overall pricing that we're seeing in terms of a decrease year over year, and this I would say is actually a slightly lower number than the average rental decrease, is down 12% now. And the reason I say that is because rental pricing peaked January, February of this year, and then has come down from that. So that if you're looking at from the peak, this number would actually be a bit higher. And just for clarity, this is a rental and condominium apartments. So this is would be dedicated rental supply, so purpose-built rental properties, and condos, the secondary market, blended into a single average. Okay, so I had this slide last month. I just wanted to bring it up again so that way people understand that, unfortunately they didn't update this data for this coming month, but what we're seeing is regionalized effects, right? There's certain areas there that those condos and the rental prices in those condos are much more impacted. And the highlighted words to the right are exactly what we've been talking about. Influx of units, previously short-term rental, a bunch of completions coming on. That's less of an impact. Cancellation of university classes, in-person university classes. That's again a lesser effect. The primary one being impact of the influx of short-term rentals is what is driving the rental prices down. Cool. So here's an update on our Volition market data. For those who are new on the call, what we like to do to really understand what's happening, like averages are nice information, but averages don't really tell us very much. They don't tell us what's happening with your individual asset in your neighborhood, because there's a lot of activity in the condo market that make an average price lower because condos are cheaper. So we look at the home price index and we track like for like properties. So that's, single family home to single family home, or 2-bedroom condos to 2-bedroom condos. So that way we really know what's happening with that exact asset. So looking at the downtown core first, if you go to the next slide, and so these are kind of the downtown core municipalities. And if you go to the next slide, we can show you exactly what those values are. We see that detached homes in the downtown core. You can't even tell there was a COVID, right? When you look at what's been happening in the single family detached market, it has been relatively, in some places, completely unaffected through the downturn that quote unquote happened in the real estate market. And these are all our investable areas. So these are the neighborhoods that we direct our clients to invest in as, kind of the A+ investment areas. These aren't necessarily the most expensive neighborhoods in Toronto, but these are the neighborhoods that are going through gentrification, going through transition, that you're able to see a big lift as the neighborhood gentrifies. Go to the next slide. So let's contrast that to everywhere else then. And that's, if you go to the next slide, that's your Vaughns, your Richmond Hills, Newmarkets, even Willowdales, stuff like that. And we'll see here, even through, COVID, there's still been an increase. We saw a slight dip kind of the post end of COVID, which is kind of the April, May-ish timeframe, but that was just a blip, and then the market continued to soldier on. So detached homes in general have been quite strong, though they still have not, especially in some of the very, hot markets in 2017, like Willowdale, they've not come back to those record prices that we saw. And then this is the story about condos that we were talking about earlier, where we're seeing condo market become stagnant. Even with all the pressure that's on the market right now with demand, interest rates, things like that, we're seeing, pricing be pretty stagnant, and in some areas actually come down slightly. So I'd be curious to see what continues to happen as, we get 4 or 6 months past this point, and we're into, CERB ending, business assistance ending, and if there is any sort of increase in COVID, cases, what that actually will mean to some of this pricing, but definitely, condos being the most affected. So, Ed, if you have anything to add on to what you're actually seeing, because what we've basically done so far is we've taken that macro view, we've kind of cut it down to neighborhood view, and then there's actually like what's happening now in the last week or two, because this is always trailing data, right? It's always what's happened in the past month, and sometimes the market's way faster than that. So, Ed, I don't know if you have anything to comment as to what you're seeing happening right now on the rental market and the housing market.
You're on mute. You're on mute. Let me unmute you. Okay.
Right now, it definitely seems like things are stabilizing. Schools are reopening. Students are slowly coming back to the city, and offices are reopening too. We're actually seeing rents kind of start moving again. Bigger spaces are definitely renting out for a little bit more and quite a bit faster than the smaller ones. That said, we're getting quite a lot of inquiries for all our rental units. All the rental units we have right now have been rented out. Even though it was slightly lower than last year or earlier this year, I would say roughly 10% or so. For the real estate buy and sell market, it seems to be still quite hot in the core. The outskirts, say North York, Markham, and Richmond Hill, Mississauga, and Scarborough, it seems to have taken a slight slowdown from, I would say, the peak of July, August this year. There was like a buying frenzy. There was, I think, a lot of pent up energy from missing the spring market, and it kind of got pushed into the summer market. So right now, even though there's quite a lot of bids and bidding wars going on, the bidding wars are not as aggressive, and there's property sitting on the market for a little bit longer than what we were seeing earlier, July and August. So is it going to continue to continue this trend where we're seeing a lot of volume in sales throughout winter? It's kind of hard to say. Right now, it seems like it's kind of a very neutral market. The buyers and sellers are both. It depends on the property. If it shows well, there's going to be a lot of bids right now. But if it's average, it's going to stay on the market for a little bit longer than previously.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I don't want to speak for Ming and Ed and Sam, but I am seeing them as busy as they've ever been. So this is probably not a good reflection of the market per se, but this is a reflection of sophisticated investors. There's a lot of activity right now amongst sophisticated investors who see this as one of the best opportunities we've seen in a long time.
Yeah. And also, I just had a quick question asking about larger condos in Toronto. The larger condos in Toronto are still actually renting out for quite well. I think earlier like a month or 2 months ago, rented out a 2-bedroom on King West, a good size 2-bedroom, roughly 850, 900 square feet for $3,300 a month. Buy and sell, the condo market is still pretty healthy. It did take a small dip from the peak, I would say, and there are nice units on the market for that I can snatch up. To be honest, I think the condo market is gonna. It's still gonna have there's still more upward space, especially with homes just skyrocketing up in value in the suburbs. When things go back to normal, offices are reopened. Hopefully, restaurants survive the next wave, and bars, clubs, whatever it may be. The attractions of downtown, we'll see a lot of people kind of wanting to move back into the core. I do understand a lot of the units are vacant right now. They used to be Airbnbs, and a combination of lack of travel, Airbnbs being shut down, and just people wanting to move out of the core in the past, say, 6 months. It has caused a lot of vacancies. So depending on if these investors or buyers or landlords can hold, if they can hold, then we probably won't see much price adjustment. But if, for example, they can't hold, we might see a dip in some of these condos. I said a lot of the condos in downtown core are foreign money, and they purchase it either with cash or significant down. And a lot of these guys don't really care too much about the $1,000, $2,000 of cash flow they're getting. They have made a ton of money already on these condos. The people who are really distressed are the ones who are, who just purchased a few years ago, may have lost their jobs, but if you can purchase a downtown condo, most likely your job is quite stable. I hope that answers.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thanks for that information, Ed.
Yeah.
Ed is
The condo market is a little bit stagnant right now.
Ed is super active in what's happening right now in the market. I'm sure he can attest to how busy he's been, but he's got some excellent knowledge as to what's happening right now on the street, as it were. Let's keep going then and dive into the main topic for tonight. And I think before we get into fourplex conversions, in general, I think it's important to understand how we even got to this point. Like, why is it that we are even talking about so specifically a fourplex conversion? And so part of what we'll go through in the beginning of this is to talk about why it makes sense for us, and then talk about the actual execution of these fourplex conversions. So Matt, I'll hand it over to you then, and you can start guiding us through this.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, so as Ming said, I want to take you through a little bit of a journey. I want a little bit of a structured way to think about things. And the way that we've chosen to do it tonight is the 5 W's, the who, what, when, why, where, and then the bonus is how. And this is the 5 W's of the fourplex conversions. So start off with why. So I stole the Y logo from a famous website.
Don't distribute these slides now.
I know, I'm gonna get sued. Okay, so let's talk about the why. And for those of you who have been with Volition long enough, you would have seen these slides before. You would have seen a portion of these slides before. This is something I threw together for our full day investment seminar, quick start crash course back in February, just before COVID hit. And threw it together probably like the night before the presentation or morning of the presentation. And this was the most photographed slide of the presentation. So I probably should have spent a little more time on it instead of just throwing it together. But without further ado, I wanted to go through sort of like the different ways to invest and the different investments that are available. So you guys, for those of you who know me, I like to crap on small towns. And the thing is, I crap on small towns, but I'm from a small town. Like, I was born and raised in Belleville. So I actually understand small towns, and I have invested in small towns. So I feel like I can speak to both sides of the coin. But let's just start off. Small towns, this may not make a lot of sense if you've missed other presentations. My other presentations talked a lot about risk mitigation. They talked about the fundamentals that underpin a market. They've talked about the importance of cash flow, or the role of cash flow, and how it's not the be all and end all. So some of the stuff may not make a lot of sense to you, and for that I apologize. But this is not the forum for me to dive into this. You'll just have to take my word for it that there is materials backing this up. And if you want to have that conversation, feel free to reach out to us, and we can guide you to the right resources. We post everything up on our website. So small town, tenant profiles take a hit. The short-term headache, long-term headache. The headache is there. The headache will always be there. The short-term ROI, you think of it in terms of cash flow. Cash flow, it generally is better in small towns because the purchase prices are lower. So cash flow looks better. And for novice investors, it often seems very attractive at the expense of many other things. So Ming had touched on those things, risk-adjusted ROI and headache-adjusted ROI. right? So when we view this, we view things kind of all things considered, but we understand people do invest out there. They still do very, very well, or they can do very, very well. You just need to understand you don't get something for nothing. So if it's cheap, it's your job as an investor to understand why it's cheap. And it needs to be part of your executional excellence to be able to mitigate the risks. If you haven't even identified the risks, you've got a problem, right? So pros, why do people do it? Cheap, there's cash flow. Cons, higher risk. Again, I'm not going to get into all what risk means, but just generally speaking, broad strokes, higher risk. Who's this for? Cash flow chasing myopic thinkers. Yeah, not to crap on all the investors, but you know, I feel like we have at Volition, we have, let's say, the right to make these types of assessments, because between all of us at Volition, we've invested in Hamilton, KWC, Sudbury, Edmonton, many other places.
And you know, it's because we were cash flow chasing myopic thinkers at the beginning. Like we were like, and I, you know, I don't want to speak for you, Matt, but I know when I first started investing, all I wanted was cash flow, and more cash flow meant a better investment. But that's a way oversimplified approach to investing.
Yeah. So I won't spend too much time on this because we've talked about this a lot in the past. Moving on, pre-construction condos. So pre-construction condos, you get a great tenant profile, short-term headache, virtually nil. Long-term headache, the same as a normal condo, generally speaking. Short-term ROI, low. There's not a lot you can do in the short term. Long-term ROI, okay, you might get a lift because you're buying pre-construction. If you buy the right pre-construction, you need to talk to us if you want to find the right pre-construction. Pros, deposit structure. So, you know, if you don't, you just need to plunk down some money every 30 days, 90 days, whatever. Cons, you can't get rent and you can't sell in the short term. And, you know, because you can't get rent, you can't rent it out, there's no mortgage pay down. So basically you're just putting money in and not really seeing anything until the thing's built or until you assign it. Who's this for? You want like literally zero headache in the short term. Or if you have short-term mortgage qualification problems and you want to leave the mortgage qualification to the future, then maybe this is for you. Okay, so we rate this a B+. Condo, so this is a resale condo. Same sort of thing, good tenant profile, short-term headache. Well, I mean, it's not no headache, but condos are fairly low headache. Long-term headache, about the same. Short-term ROI, long-term ROI, the prospects are fairly similar. Affordability, a little bit less because you got to plunk down your 20% right off the bat, and you've got to get mortgage qualification. Pros, it's an entry-level type of asset, you know, for about $150,000 for, let's say, a $750,000 condo. Cons, it's hard to cash flow. If you've got 20% down, it's unlikely that you'll cash flow actually until you start plunking down 25%, 30%, and or you work with us to find you condos. There's only, well, the environment has changed a little bit now, but previously there were only a few buildings that actually worked, and Volition had identified what those buildings were. So you don't want to just buy anywhere. If this is of interest to you, then come talk to us. Who's this for? You want minimal headache and you have limited cash to invest. It's funny I say limited cash when I'm talking about 150,000, but that is the reality here in Toronto, right? Okay, next. Entry-level multi. So we're talking about duplexes, we're talking about triplexes. Generally speaking, we're talking about turnkey or very minimal renos. You get a great tenant profile. So we're starting to now reach, we're starting to get into our bread and butter. This is the Volition bread and butter, and this is what the majority of our clients are gunning for. They're gunning for owning a house, owning land, ground-oriented units, whatever you want to call it. Right? Because at the end of the day, land is the appreciating asset. It's not usually or ever the building that sits on top of the land. It is the land itself. Same thing for a condo. It's not the box in the sky that is worth anything. It's actually the land, the location, right? So with that in mind, we want to own land because land is the appreciating asset. And in fact, the building is worth less and less every year, right? It gets older. It's a depreciating asset, actually. So it's the land. So what does it require? It requires, 350,000. So a little more cash. Who's this for? It's an entry-level freehold. So this is good, as a personal residence. So, one of the questions I think we had from, not sure, I can't remember if it was Man Meets or, but it was someone who asked around, hey, personal residence, you guys help with that? Yeah, we do, because it's an investment, or it can be an investment, and it can be a very good investment. It can be a mortgage helper, help you qualify as well, right? Overall, this is our bread and butter. This is what we have a lot of. We own these, a lot of our clients own these. But the natural evolution of this is this. So this is the luxury triplex conversion. So whereas we used to have clients before who had an entry-level multifamily from a couple of years ago, they built some equity, they refinance, they do an equity takeout, and now they've got lots of cash to do something bigger, something a little more luxurious, a luxury triplex conversion. So here you are providing a complete condo alternative. This thing is as nice as any condo out there, and you're attracting the tenant profile that also reflects that. They are in the right areas, they are willing to pay those rents. And we're talking like $2,500, $3,000, $3,800 for rents in the areas that we operate. So tenant profile is amazing. Short-term headache, this used to be an F, but now that we've moved on to, well, I'm getting ahead of myself. Now that we've moved on to fourplex, I've upgraded this to an E. This used to be an F, because this used to be our biggest headache type of project in the short term, because it's really, really difficult to execute on these. Long-term headache, there is no headache now. You've got practically a brand new build. You have amazing tenants, amazing location, everything's operating pretty flawlessly. Short-term ROI. So if you consider the short-term ROI including the forced depreciation after the renovation, because we're creating these things. We're going in, finding an old single-family home, and we are creating these things. So the lift is incredible on these things, right? Again, this used to be an A+. I've downgraded it because we have something else coming up now. And same thing in long-term ROI. This used to be an A+, and I've downgraded it because we got something else. Affordability. This used to be an F, but now we got something else that's a little more expensive. So, okay, so pros. So it's new. So you're gonna have very few problems with it. It's great. You're gonna attract the best tenant profile. It cash flows, and you've created a solid lift. Cons. You need a lot of cash, to the tune of 800,000 plus for something like this. Yeah, I heard some people go, wow. I thought I muted everyone on the line, but I heard someone say, whoa. Yeah, there is a lot of cash.
It is true. It is a wow. These are really expensive.
Yeah, this is like jaw-dropping kind of type of dollars. Like, I get it. Like, this isn't lost on me. We've become desensitized to these numbers, but I still appreciate the fact that this is a lot of money. Right? So who's this for? People with lots of cash, big mortgage qualification, because the business model here typically is to sink in a $500,000 reno, thereabouts, and then raise the property value and then refinance and get most of the reno money back. Right? So you need big mortgage qualification to the tune of, you got to qualify for a 1.x million dollar mortgage, right? And who's this for? Someone who has the time, energy, who wants to put the time and energy into it. I'm not talking about swinging the hammers. I'm talking about educating yourself to know this business model through and through, because there's lots and lots of ways that you can fail. There's lots of ways this can go wrong. And the slightest mistake can cost you thousands, tens of thousands, or hundreds of thousands of dollars, literally, right? Overall, this is an A investment. Used to be A+, but again, we've downgraded it.
And I just want to add on to the luxury triplex one is that lots of cash, yes, but lots of cash is actually kind of common. If you do real estate for investing for a while, you'll find your equity is growing. It's actually not impossible to come up with $800,000 of cash. What is really difficult is the mortgage qualification. That's like bold, underlined. That's the one that's going to stop most people from being able to execute on multiple of these.
Yeah. Okay, and then we're getting in now into the topic of the night. So luxury fourplex conversions. Tenant profile, A+. Very similar to the luxury triplex. Short-term headache, even worse than the triplex. Long-term headache, that's great. New place, everything's running perfectly fine. Short-term ROI, the lift is even higher than a luxury triplex. Long-term ROI, the prospects are even greater. Affordability, worse. So yes, there is something worse than a luxury triplex now. Pros, it's new, it's cash flowing even after you refinance. And you don't get a solid lift, you get a massive lift. And we'll get into a couple of those numbers a bit later, but these numbers are pretty astounding. Cons, you're looking at, 1.x millions of dollars of cash required, 1.35. Yeah, it's a ton of cash. Some people, there's an argument, okay, maybe you can finance the reno. Yes, you could. Unless you're extremely experienced, I wouldn't recommend financing a reno.
It's very risky.
It's very risky.
It's a long conversation, but it's very risky.
Yeah, unless you know exactly what you're doing and you've done this, you can do this day in, day out, I wouldn't recommend it. But anyway, but again, where does this money come from? Oftentimes, this can come from previous investments that have grown in equity and then through an equity takeout, through a refinance, and that becomes the seed capital for an investment like this. So who's this for? Someone with boatloads of cash. Who has massive mortgage qualification and again has the time and energy and willing to put the time and effort into educating themselves and networking and creating the team and so on and so forth. Overall, this is even a better investment than the luxury triplex. So the numbers are bigger, but the returns are even bigger. Okay, so we've got a blank column there, and I'll leave that blank. We'll get to that later. But the point here is that there is no one size fits all. People ask, what's the best investment? It's whatever's right for you. And you won't know what's right for you until you sit down with us, until you figure out what your plan is and figure out what your goals are. And then we can start guiding you towards some of the stuff. These are old slides. So again, we did a meetup on triplex conversions before. So this is old stuff. So I just want to give you a sense, we've been through this before, but now we're into the 5 W's, the fourplex conversion. So we did the why, and that was the matrix. Like, why would I invest in one of those fourplexes? Well, these are the reasons. Now let's talk about what. What? There's 2 ways you can approach this. There's 4 units in one building. It's very, very common. And then there's a newer way to do it now, where it's 3 units in one building, plus a laneway suite. And okay, so again, in previous meetups, we've talked about laneway housing, so that's not going to be the crux and the focus of our conversation here tonight, but that is an integral part of executing on a fourplex strategy if that is the model you're following. So there's 2 ways to do it, right? In fact, oh my God, 4 units in one building plus a laneway? What's that? Fourplex conversion? No, that's a 5plex conversion. Boom.
You're
Mind blown. What?
I can hear the cheers from the audience now, Matt.
Yeah. The point here is we have called it a fourplex conversion for ease of understanding. We get it. We wanted something that was easy to understand, easy to digest. So we called it a fourplex. The reality is the approach to going even larger is not a hell of a lot different. There's a lot more to consider in terms of the actual building and can it do it and everything else. But the approach from a process perspective isn't that much different. So when we talk about 4 units, we could be talking about 5 units. Okay. So I want to show this photo here because this was what we showed for a triplex previously. In fact, a bunch of you actually have a walk through this actual property. This was a triplex conversion. This was triplex conversion done by Sam of the Volition team. And it was amazing. It worked out. It was flawless. It was sublime. And that was the model, right? And we talked about this before. The reason I'm showing this is because a fourplex doesn't look a hell of a lot different than a triplex, arguably, right? So, you know, we still got to have that same level of finish, and it's got to be like a condo replacement, and you know, it's got to be amazing. It's really got to stand out. Okay, so next question is where? So this is a map of Toronto, and before I show you, now this is the question. You shouldn't be asking where. You should be asking this question. You shouldn't be asking where do I invest or what's the best place to do it. The question you have to answer is this: what is the single most desirable feature that will help me determine where to buy? And that answer is transit. Okay, so transit is the dictating factor. So I have very rudimentary, basically mapped out our transit routes in Toronto. It's pretty pathetic for a large city. We have an abysmal transportation system, but it is what it is. So let's work with it.
I thought you were talking about your MS Paint skills were really sad.
No, my MS Paint skills were amazing. That's not the part that was hurting here. Okay, so what do we got here? So along here, can you see my cursor? Whatever. We've got the Bloor line, we've got the University line. We don't got much more than that, right? We've got some dedicated streetcar lines. You know, we're talking about, you know, Gerrard, and, you know, we got a dedicated streetcar line along St. Clair, and we have the Eglinton Crossrail. So that's basically it, right? So you're trying to concentrate around that because that is what it's going to, that's where your tenant profile is going to want to be. And anyway, there's lots of other stuff. There's lots and lots of research to indicate that in an economic downturn, values as well as rents are insulated to the tune of somewhere between 17 and 22% more than if you were more than 1,000 meters away from a transit station. So there's a whole bunch of data to support that. But suffice to say, for the time being, you want to be around transit. So the neighborhoods that we've identified are these ones then. It's like Annex on the west side, Annex, Little Italy, Trinity Bellwoods, Dovercourt, Wallace Emerson, Little Portugal. On the east side, you've got East York, Riverdale. You know, there's a whole bunch of, like, Danforth. There's a whole bunch of places there, as well as out to the beaches. Those here are going to be your primary areas. Your secondary areas are going to be South Parkdale. South Parkdale is a little rougher around the edges. So that's the exception to most of the downtown neighborhoods. St. Clair West, starting very up and coming. We like it a lot. A lot of our clients are starting to invest there. Eglinton West, and then Eglinton East and St. Clair East, that's not typically where we have a lot of our clients. Most of it is in the other areas that I've already mentioned. And where I have dollar signs, yes, they're around transit routes, but it doesn't matter. They're not viable as investments because the purchase prices are just too high to make it viable, right? So there might be great residential areas, don't get me wrong. Like, who's going to say that, you know, Yonge and Egg or Bayview and whatever aren't great residential areas? They're not great investment areas, okay? So you won't get rents to justify the purchase prices, okay? So I've talked about this before. Now let's talk about fourplexes. It's even more stringent, right? It's even more stringent. You need super high ARVs and super high rents to make this work. And the only places it's going to work are in the primo areas. So we're talking like Annex, Little Italy, Trinity Bellwoods, and like probably as far out as like maybe Dovercourt, right? On the west side. On the east side, you got like Riverdale, North Riverdale, South Riverdale, and like Plater. There's a few areas that work, not all areas, right? So don't get me wrong. There's a lot of people who try and they can still be very, very successful. But what we have found is you need super high ARVs. Like, how high do the ARVs need to be, Ed and Ming?
I mean, you're looking at purchasing, let's say, like mid ones. If you're like 1.4 to 1.6, then your ARV needs to be closer to like the threes. You know, high twos, low threes for these conversion projects to make sense. Did that give you enough time for you to run and close your door?
Yeah, a whole bunch of bugs were flying in. So I've got my computer monitor and I literally have about 7 bugs that are flying across my monitor right now. So I'm like, oh, I figured I'd use the opportunity to like hand the spotlight off to you and go close my door. Yeah.
But yeah,
I mean,
there's very few neighborhoods. Yeah, very few neighborhoods that have $3 million homes, and that $3 million homes are in abundance enough for us to establish the ARVs that are required.
Yeah. And Ed, what are the type of rents that we require in order to make this happen?
You're looking at rents above $10,000 to $11,000. If you're looking for a $3 million ARV, you're looking at probably around $12,000 to $13,000 in rents monthly.
Yeah.
You know, if everything done properly, your expenses, monthly expenses, should be like $1,000 to $1,200. So it's actually very achievable in good pockets of the core, and you should be able to purchase one of these like anywhere, like what Ming said, between 1.4 to 1.7 million, depending on the area. Obviously, nice areas may have higher justifications for higher ARVs, right? So
yeah, so like we are literally evaluating these on case by case basis. Like we've got a general model, and the general model, we've got ranges, and but when we go drill down, we're literally looking at the street, because street by street, properties may or may not be able to support those types of things. So like we're evaluating, we're looking at a ton of different factors, which we'll get to in a sec. And we're looking at the neighborhood, we're looking at neighboring properties, neighboring streets. And ultimately we have to make sure that the ARV and the rents support it. So like this circle I have here is actually in reality much, much smaller, right? I just have it here as a general indicator as to where we need to be focusing, but in reality, it's much, much smaller than this.
You know what's happening right now? All our clients are looking at the map and seeing if their home falls within that little circle that you drew there.
So yeah, I think Ed's going to be taking it from here.
Oh, Ed, you're on mute.
yeah, sorry about that. Yeah, so wanted to quickly go over on how we identify properties that are suitable for fourplexes or even triplexes and fiveplexes. I think we're using fourplex as an arbitrary number right now. And to identify these properties is quite tricky. There's a lot of volume in Toronto. There's a lot of properties in the core. Everything is very, very dense. And the properties are sitting on very small lots, especially if you're used to the 50-foot, 40-foot lots when you're in the suburbs or you're 60 plus. We're looking at anywhere between a 12-foot lot to a 25-foot lot in a downtown core. And we need to make sure that the house that the property is sitting on is suitable for a conversion. But, and I want to say that most homes don't. Like the minimum frontage that we would want for a fourplex conversion would probably be 18 feet, and that would be tight, and that is for a semi. For detached homes, we'll probably be looking at a 20-foot plus frontage. The reason for that is you need a certain amount of space within the home itself to make sizable rooms for your tenants or for yourself to live in. So yeah, I mean, do you want to the next slide?
Uh, hey, Matt, can you go to the next slide?
Oh, sorry. I was dealing with
It-
the lights flying across my screen.
it's not like you even live in the countryside, buddy.
Apart from the general parameters of what we're looking for a fourplex, like the lot size is very important, but also zoning, the amount of parking, and the fire egresses that you have in the building is very, very important. A lot of these things can be built, but to plan and to build these to plan may be a challenge depending on where the property situates and how big the property is. For example, parking. If you don't have a laneway that can be converted to a laneway house, in the Toronto core area, you need something called N-1, which is number of units minus 1 for the parking requirements. So for a fourplex, you'll need 3 parking spots, 3 legal parking spots. And I will tell you that majority of residential properties in downtown core do not have 3 legal parking spots. Unless say you are in Parkdale or maybe parts of the annex, but some areas over there are not the greatest homes and you won't see fantastic rent. And then if you go a little bit more towards the annex, you're going to find also very, very expensive properties, and they don't always work for our fourplex, fiveplex, sixplex formulas. The fire code, each unit needs to have, usually they say 2 means of egress. That's not always the case if you have a dedicated entrance. There's many things involved here, like depending on how far the unit is above ground. Is it 1 story, 2 story, 3 stories? If it's a 2-story unit, you need to find another means of egress usually. So you can build fire, fire balconies, fire escapes, etc. But those are all added costs, which may make the project go over budget. So these are all things that you would consider when, or how, and these are the things that how we would choose a fourplex a conversion project. And on top of that is the accesses. So you need to have adequate number of accesses. If there is a shared entrance, for example, between a main unit, between 2 units, it means that both units will have to have a second means of egress. And unless you have a very long lot or very wide lot, it may be very, very hard to do so. Let's say secondary fire escape stairs from the back. So the easiest solution that we have found is to find a property that can be a laneway house potential. The reason for this is because once you do add a laneway house, you could really just make the house into, say, a triplex. The laneway house itself would be the 4th unit. And with the laneway house, the city bylaws actually makes it so that the whole property is exempt from the parking restrictions. And this is huge because the parking restrictions is something that holds back a lot of the properties from being able to create the maximum value out of the piece of land or the amount of house on the lot itself. And like I said, Toronto, the lot sizes are small, and the number of legal parking spaces are very limited for most of these properties. But if you could find a nice 20-foot by 120 or 130-foot lot with proper laneway housing, meets the proper laneway housing criteria, you're able to create a very, very high cash flowing property for relatively, not affordable, but I would say like for very, very, for a very, very good cap rate. So, and if you don't mind going to the next slide. Also, things to consider is when we're looking at properties is, can these properties actually be built in this neighborhood? And what are some of the very expensive things to do, which we may want to avoid? For example, walkouts, low basement heights, you got a low bearing wall right in the middle of the house. It may make these conversions actually quite difficult. nothing's impossible. Everything is doable with a lot of money thrown at the property, but underpinning, creating walkouts, rejoicing the whole property is all quite expensive and may make or break the project. So these are all things that you would consider before you undertake or buy a property to undertake one of these projects. Also, like I said, right now, laneways are a huge thing. They're very hot. And I think they are one of the best ways to make any property work. Not any property, to make a property work and to make your next conversion property have great cash flow and great ROIs and great, what do you call it? Um, reappraisals once a project is done. We're seeing on blog TOs, these laneway houses are selling for $1 million plus. It's quite ridiculous. But I can tell you a laneway house with 3 bedrooms should rent in a good neighborhood can rent between 4 to 5K quite easily. 2 stories, 1,600 square feet, 1,400 square feet, separate entrance, detached from the main house completely. So that is kind of the path that we are going down for a lot of fourplexes. Not saying that a single family home broken down into 4 units inside a house itself won't work. I'm saying that a laneway house is not the easy way, but it seems like the numbers work a little bit better. Also, things to consider is distance to fire hydrants. Toronto inspectors are very, very stringent on the fire code. You need to have a certain distance from fire hydrants to the house, especially if you want to add additional units to the house. If you are not close enough, you may have to add extra fire precautions into the property, and these fire precautions are very expensive. Commercial fire hydrants or sprinklers, they are not very affordable for most of these smaller multis. We aren't creating a small apartment complex. We're creating we're in this smaller market where we're creating these, I guess, affordable multis, which usually yield actually a little bit better cap rate than the larger ones. And lastly, the neighborhood. Some neighborhoods in Toronto will just not allow these properties at all. The neighbors will go up in arms, and if you have anything that needs to go to the committee, which you will most likely require, you will get shut down quite hard. And I'm talking about areas like Rosedale, right, Leaside, anywhere where it's majority detached single-family homes. I would try to avoid. Anything in the core is not too bad, but once you actually stray a little bit outwards, or you get into the more expensive neighborhoods, it's just not a good idea to do so. Best thing to do is usually to talk with one of us or another architect or someone who knows the area quite well to get a feeling to see if this is a suitable project for the neighborhood or not.
Actually, I just want to add on to that. We work with a team who has a ton of experience in doing this. And for example, the architect that we work with has maps where he maps out the different wards because he knows that certain wards and certain city councilors are friendly and encouraging of this type of development because they understand that it leads to additional housing units, as opposed to just one detached home. You could house 4 different units, their family, 4 different dwellings. And so we work with people who know, and we ourselves have a ton of experience in identifying these neighborhoods and being able to identify the likelihood of something being approved. It's not an easy process. It's not a science. It's an art. And so that's the one thing you need to understand is, we walk in and we will, whenever we go through one of these properties, we'll have a checklist and we will be, checking these things off, and if these things make sense, only then, we've got it's a 25 or 30 point checklist, and only then if we feel that it passes our first pass filter, do we move on to the next phase of getting a consultation and what have you? So this is not an easy process, and Ed is really, he's giving you a high level overview, but he's really downplaying his experience when he walks through one of these. It's like, we're looking at things that are, you wouldn't even think of when you start going through one of these to see whether or not it makes sense. So these are very, very tough. Don't think that just buying any house and trying to convert it, it's going to work. Chances are it won't work. Chances are the average house won't work. So we're looking for very, very specific things.
I think that said, it's you gotta be very wary. If you just miss a few of the requirements, what may end up happening is you won't be able to add the extra unit, or even if you do so, it would have to be either legally, or it just won't yield very good rent because of the spacing and whatnot. But yeah, that's basically it for now. I mean, if anyone really wants to talk a little bit more in depth about this, or about a certain project or a certain property, feel free to contact one of us or myself. But
yeah, I think Ed's involved in like 3 or 4 of them right now, and same with Ming, and Sam literally just built one of these and sold it for a record price. A triplex, not a fourplex. But again, the process is very similar. So we have got a ton of experience. Reach out to someone on the team, and we can talk you through this a bit further. So that was how part 1. How, because we're doing the 5 W's, right? So we're on to how now. How part 1. Now we're on to how part 2. So this is you, Ming.
Yeah. Thanks, guys. And I would emphasize what Matt said about Ed really downplaying the level of complexity, and also maybe not touching on the consequences if it's not done right, because you could technically do these in a lot of places, but what you may end up getting hit with are development fees, objections at COA, having to pay legal fees as you go through appeals courts. Like the rabbit hole of badness is pretty deep if you're not kind of selecting the right property off the bat. So it is really important to make sure that you're getting into the right asset for this kind of conversion, be it fourplex, triplex, even duplex. They all require things. If you just want a legal basement suite, right? Like let's say it's a single family home, you want to buy a legal basement suite, you want to buy a house to live in, and you want to add a legal basement suite to help you with your income, supplement your mortgage. You can't just do that. Like it has to meet really high requirements. You have to meet egress requirements. There's setback requirements, potential, right-of-way requirements as well. So these are, there's a lot to get into, and this is definitely beyond the scope of, traditional realtor services to make sure that these kind of requirements are identified. So anyway, once you've got the property, we found, you've been out with Ed, he's found you this amazing place. Now what? Like now you got to build this. So what do you do once you have this place under contract? So if you can go to the next slide, I'll talk a bit about that process. So there's basically 4 major parts that get us from the point of, getting the accepted agreement of purchase and sale to I'm handing the keys over to my new renter. So if you go to the next slide, we'll start with what we call the pre-closing phase. Now, the pre-closing phase is really, before we get to closing, what are all the things that we need to do to get us set up so we're able to do, we're able to execute on construction when the time allows for it, right? So the first thing that we want to start off with, I just closed my screen by accident. First thing we want to start off with is what we like to call Power Day. And that is, everybody who has a stake in this project, getting them on site so they can see the things they need to see before we get further in the process. So what does that mean exactly? You're going to need, your team consists of a bunch of people. You need somebody to manage the project, a PM. And a PM is not simply like, oh, you've got X task due on X date, so you got to get it done. That's the very, very basics. Construction PMing is making sure that elements of the design process are considered to make sure you're achieving your goal. So it comes with a level of expertise in both construction as well as planning for these kind of projects. I'll give you an example. When we go get our drawings and the engineer comes back with suggestions as to, let's say, how to fix structural issues, somebody with good PMing knowledge can actually look at the structural drawings and say, hey, maybe we don't do it this way. Maybe, Mr. Engineer, can you help me figure out a different way to do this to potentially save costs on your project, or keep with what we're trying to achieve? Maybe it's an open plan that we're trying to achieve within that unit, and that's something that somebody who's bringing construction PM expertise is able to do. So number one, your construction PM needs to be there. Number two, you need your architect, and your architect is actually a team. So it's not just one dude architect. It's you want the architect there so you can see as a vision, or her as a vision, what they want to do with the place. And then you also hopefully can do a site measure. The site measure is literally measuring out the building, every square inch of the building, to make sure that you have an accurate plan as to what the property looks like in its current state. Because that's going to be your template for all your other drawings that are going to come afterwards. The other thing you need is to make sure your general contractor's on there. So you can talk through the vision of the place, and your general contractor is going to start to get an idea of what he needs to, or she needs to do on this property, and can start developing in their heads a high-level price for you, right? The next thing that you want there as well is your designer. So this is not like HGTV, fluffy pillow type designer. This is a proper interior designer, a licensed interior designer who specializes in multifamily. So they understand space constraints, flows of areas that we're looking at, where we may want to carve out parts of, I don't know, bathrooms or closets, so we can add in powder rooms and increase the value and rents of the property. All these people you want to get into the property before you close, because they need to take those measurements. They need to look to see what they're doing. So that way they got some time. They need a couple of weeks to do that kind of work. So they can start figuring out, okay, architectural fees are going to be this much. GC renovations costs are going to be this much. PMing fees are going to be this much. And they can all just establish their quotations. The other thing that you want to get done, I'm getting a bunch of echo on the web, on the chat, Matt.
Oh. Okay, I just muted someone. Okay,
cool. Thanks. So the next thing you want to try to get done is surveys, and I talked about the site measure, but a survey if you need it. Most likely you need it. Most surveys that come with properties that you're buying are antiquated and don't give enough level of detail that we need to be able to do a fourplex or any sort of multifamily conversion. Old surveys are just very generalized. It's like, here's the property, here's the relative measurements. None of the additional legal information that we need is on there. So, who owns this right of way? How was it established? These are actually parts of the survey. A survey is not just measuring out what's yours and what's what's your neighbor's. It's figuring out what are all the legal changes that have been made to establish things like right-of-ways or setbacks, or who owns this piece of land. That's a very key part of the survey. We also want to add in, if we can, a couple of topographical measurements. It's not a full topographical survey, but we'll want to put in certain height measurements. So that way, if we decide, I don't know, to do a deck, or we want to check grading of the property, that all that information is in there in the survey. So you want to try to get your survey done as well before closing. And This is where it's really important to get a good surveyor. You don't want to get a cheap surveyor because it's very difficult to go back and add information. You're better paying top dollar for a great surveyor up front, getting everything documented properly, stamped with the surveyor's stamp, and then you can use that as a binding legal document as you go through the process. All this, we're doing all of this so that we can drive towards high-level pricing and conceptual drawings, right? So our high-level pricing is, hey, you know, given the input from the PM, the architect, the designer, the GC can say, okay, you know, you want to underpin, you want to extend the main floor, you want to add a new basement walkout, we're looking at 600, 700,000. Like, they can give you that high-level quote. Now, that high-level quote that the GC is going to give you is high-level. For a GC to accurately quote you, they need more than that. They can't just walk through a place and give you a price. Any GC that does that is, GCs that do that, you'll run into problems as the project progresses because they haven't been able to actually see the bones of the house at that point. There's no drawings, there's no structural drawings. They don't know if they're specifying, you know, 1 2x10 every 16 inches on center, or they're specifying, you know, 20 10x10s every 12 inches on center. You know, I could be talking about $10,000 in structural, I could be talking about $40,000 in structural. So until you know, a GC gets full information, they can't accurately quote, but they should be able to develop at least a high-level quote based on experience at this point. That's kind of the pre-closing phase of things. Any questions on that before I move on to the next phase?
Do you want to comment quickly, even before pre-closing, so even before you acquire the property, what is it that you do? Like, do you do an on-site with consultation with experts, et cetera?
So once we have the APS or before the APS?
No, this is before you've even put it in the offer. You don't. So
Yep.
There's a step before this. I would say probably after. And maybe it's just not reflected here, but it's a step after. You know, Ed talks about his checklist. That checklist gets us to a certain level of confidence. What's the next step? But before you put in an offer.
Sorry?
But before you put in the offer.
Yeah, so, you know, Ed and myself and Sam will try to establish like a high-level budget based on our experience, right? Because in order for you to create a pro forma and for you to do the financial analysis to see if this is the right property for you to do an offer in, you need to be able to work off something, right? So, you know, we have enough experience that we can look at a project, talk about, you know, as we're going through it and say, okay, this is going to be, you know, roughly a $600,000 renovation. What we're talking about is roughly $600,000 renovation. So that way you can, and we'll work on this together, obviously, with our investor clients. You can then plug that information into your spreadsheets. We can plug into our spreadsheets and say like, hey, you know, this is $600,000 works out, or, you know, if we need to do $600,000, it's not going to be worthwhile for us to execute on this property. So we do that financial analysis before we put in that offer.
Yeah. And on-site consultations with architects?
Yeah, so sometimes, you know, depending on the property, depending on the market, because sometimes the market's extremely fast. We've only got, you know, 12 hours, 24 hours to react to a property. But if the conditions allow, we can bring an architect on site. Let's say, you know, we want, this house only makes sense if we have laneway, if we can put a laneway suite on it, for example. Our architects will come out on site with us, look at the property and give their, you know, official evaluation at that point and say, okay, we're meeting the right kind of requirements for a laneway suite. You know, we've got a 95% confidence that we can get a laneway suite here. And that is something that our architects can do. And it depends, like I said, if we have the luxury of being able to bring an architect through, if we have got the time to do that.
Yeah.
Cool. So let's move on then to the next stage. So next stage is property closing. So at this point in time, we have kind of our high level, what we want to do with the property. And now we've got the actual property in our hands. So what do we do when we get one of these properties? We take a hammer and we start breaking things down. We need the property to be naked, right? Like we need to see what's under all those walls. We need that for a number of reasons. So we call it cosmetic demo. Cosmetic demo is like taking out all the drywall, all the flooring, so we can see all the structure, all the systems that are there. We can look for fire damage, water damage, problems with the structure as it exists. We pull all of that down, strip the house as bare as we can, pre-permit, because you're allowed to take off drywall, right? We don't take out any walls themselves, and certainly nothing structural. But that gives us a, quote unquote, naked house. We know now what we're dealing with. And with that, now that we have the cosmetic demo completed, we can go into developing the detailed drawing set, like what we call an architectural drawing set. This part of the construction process actually takes quite a bit of time. A lot of people think once they've got the house, a couple of weeks, and they're submitting for permits. So that couldn't be further from the truth. The best projects are actually those that spend months in this stage, because we are creating a very good set of, electrical drawings, HVAC drawings, structural drawings. We're walking through, the design of the layouts. We're trying to solve all the problems in the virtual world in CAD first before we submit for permits. Because once we submit for permits, while we can still make permit updates, we can still do, scope changes, it's a lot more challenging too. And there can be downstream impacts, which we can't model easily because things are already live. So in something as complex as a fourplex, or even more so in a 5 or 6plex, this is where we'll spend a good chunk of time. Oftentimes we'll spend 3 to 4 months in this stage to come up with an excellent set of drawings, which have lots of things considered. We want to understand, what are the water systems we're going to use? Are we going with a tank? Are we going tankless? Because that can affect our floor plans. What kind of heating and cooling systems are we going with? Are we meeting air recirculation and fresh air requirements, which are especially important, in a kind of our post-COVID world? Are we doing structural drawing reviews? Have they considered, maybe the use of load-bearing walls instead of large spans, which can be very expensive? Once we've created all these drawing sets, so we've got, full structural drawings, we've got full HVAC drawings, we've got electrical drawing set, not as critical, but very nice to have. We've got an architectural drawing set. We can now actually price it, right? So you don't actually know the full accurate price of your renovation until you've got all these drawing sets, because a general contractor needs to look at your layouts and say, okay, you want, this open span, you want this additional window, you want underpinning, you want this staircase moved, you want all these things. That's, check mark cost, adding all that up. Without a detailed list of things and the finishes that you're potentially looking at. So let's say you want your flooring to be $10 a square foot, but you want your backsplash to be $20 a square foot. Without all that information on a detailed line by line basis, how could you quote, right? You can't actually generate an accurate quote. And you need drawing sets because you need to know, hey, my island is going to be 15 foot long, or hey, my island is going to be 2 feet long, right? Like those things will drastically change the costs of your materials. So it's not until you're into the project, at least 3 or 4 months, that you can start to get a very good sense as to the cost of the project. Let's see, where are we right now? So that gets us to the detailed budget and scope. Once we've got the detailed scope, which is literally, 100, 200 lines of every single thing that we're doing in the project, and we know what our budget is based on all the drawings and all the lines, we come together and say, great, this looks awesome, let's go for it. And that takes us to the next slide, which is actually construction. Now, construction, so you can see that like 50% of this project has been not even other than demo, like I'm not hammering any nails in, right? We spend a lot of time in the pre-closing and post-closing phase to get everything that we need, because now we start with submitting for a permit. And the way we do this is we submit for a duplex permit first. So we're doing this as of right. You know, we're looking to, like, who can we want to do an as of right.
It's very Spanish, right? Oops.
I'm trying to see who it is. Okay. Just muted Brenda. And I called Brenda out.
So basically what we're doing is we submit first for a duplex permit. So I want a fourplex, I want a sixplex. Why am I submitting a duplex permit? Well, in any property in Toronto, you can build a duplex, what we call as of right. So you don't need special permissions, you don't need committee of adjustments. Anybody's allowed to create a duplex as long as your house meets the requirements, right? Egresses, ceiling heights, fire separation, all the stuff that Ed has checked out for you, you can build a duplex. So we want to start construction. We spent the last 3 or 4 months planning. We want to get to construction now. So submitting a duplex permit immediately allows us to start construction phase. So we submit for duplex permit, we get that back, we start swinging the hammers, and we start with the actual construction of the project. The next thing that we do in kind of parallel with this is we submit for committee of adjustments if it's required. Most of the projects that we do, we're going to the committee of adjustments. So the committee of adjustments is basically a committee set up to look at variances to bylaws. So let's say, you know, the bylaw says in your area, you can only build, 2,000 square feet based on the size of your lot. But we want to build a bigger house. We want to build 2,500 square feet. So there's a 500 square foot variance. We have to ask for permission for that. We have to go to committee of adjustments, right? And the committee of adjustments is the one that says yes or no to the variance that we're looking for. They'll base it on a whole bunch of things. Is it in line with the neighborhood, right? Or is what you're asking for in terms of this extra 500 square feet outrageous? Is every house on that street really, really tiny, but you're the only one building this massive house, right? So there's a bunch of, it's almost like case law. They'll look at the cases in the neighborhood to see whether or not the variances that you're asking for are in line and reasonable. Part of our experience, which is valuable, is we are familiar with the neighborhoods and what you can and cannot get away with. It's not 100% guaranteed that you'll get passed at COA, but it's a hell of a lot better than having none of that and trying to pass at COA. So we get into, we do our COA submission. Usually we're asking, maybe it's more square footage, maybe your house is extra long, maybe it's a parking variance. Oftentimes we have to have a parking variance because parking requirements are quite strict, right? N-1, if we're building a 4 or 5-plex, who's got 4 parking spots in their downtown Toronto house? So again, based on our experience, we know areas, we know homes, we know neighborhoods that we have a better chance of getting that variance of parking, at the COA versus not being able to. And we also have architects that are experienced enough to present the arguments in the right way to get variances on things like parking. So anyway, once that's done, we actually get into the actual construction itself. That starts off with framing. So, if you're not familiar with what framing is literally the frame of the house. We do wood frame houses, at the size and scale we're talking about. So we start off with something called structural framing, which is like, what is all the structure that's required? And then we move on to cosmetic framing, which is framing out the bathrooms and bedrooms and living spaces and things like that. If you go, we can jump to the next slide. And basically, at this point, we follow a pretty standard construction process. Now, we may be submitting multiple permits through this process, through each of the phases and each of the steps that we're going through. But it's, framing, fire separation inspections, rough-in plumbing, HVAC rough-ins, insulation, vapor barrier. Like you can go on the internet and search this stuff. City of Toronto has a set of inspections that they go through, and we're pretty much doing all of them because most of them will apply to our renovation, right? If we're doing underpinning, we have a foundational inspection, and we're just going through inspection by inspection, closing off the permits when we're done related to that, and then opening up new permits for the next phase of each project. And then we just rinse and repeat till we get to the point where the last permit gets closed off. We have our what's it called, our final inspection, and then my daughter's waving hi to me. We have our final inspection, and then we have occupancy, which means your wonderful tenants can now move in at that point. So yeah, that's kind of the construction process in a nutshell. Any questions about that? I know I talked like a lot, but this is a condensed version that Shelby so kindly put together for us based on like a 70-step detailed flowchart that we use, and that's also a high-level flowchart to help guide our clients through the process.
Ming, I just want to ask you a question. So why do you open and close so many permits? You said start off with the duplex, and then what's that all about? Yeah,
so basically, if you go and you buy a house and you say, I want to build 4 units, the City of Toronto will say, awesome. Here's your development charge. Here's your educational fee. Here's, I can't remember all the names of the levies. Yeah. So thank you. Please write us a check for $100,000, right? And these are absolutely good fees, but they're not meant for what we're doing. If you're building a condo, yes, there's development charges because a condo is putting a huge new strain on the area. Those development fees need to be pulled together because, the sewer systems need to be upgraded. The road systems now need to be upgraded. Electrical systems need to be upgraded to support a new condo build. But if you're turning a house and you're adding 1 unit, development charges were never intended, for just an additional unit. So what we do is we build it as a 2-unit property, and then we add on a unit and we make it 3 units, and that's a permit. And then we add on a 4th unit as just another permit. And we're doing an incremental process to add on these units. And I'm oversimplifying this because there's a ton of restrictions. Like, every subsequent unit must be smaller than the units preceding it. And, we have to make sure that we're showing proper fire separation and exits and entrances and egresses and fire refuges for each of these units. But we are doing it in a phased approach. So that way we're avoiding development charges because we are allowed to add incremental units. And it's not like this is some sort of, backdoor that we're, exploiting with the city. The city is well aware because when we go to Committee of Adjustments, we tell them what we're up to. We tell them we're trying to get to 4 units. These are the variances we're looking for, and we'll do it through a phased permit process. It's not, not something we're trying to hide. It is fully above board with the city, but the city understands that we are doing this process because development charges are meant for large buildings, which are actually putting strain on city resources. So they need those tax dollars so they can upgrade those city services. Any other questions from anybody?
How much are development fees?
They vary. I think I heard $45,000 per unit.
Yeah, that was actually missing some. So basically, roughly speaking, for every 2-bedroom unit, you're looking, once you combine development charges like educational levies and the park levy, you're into about $60,000 per unit. So if you didn't know what you were doing and you thought, hey, you know what? I bought this house. I think it's great. I'm going to make this into a 4-plex. I got my architect to draw up 4-plex plans. I submit them for permits. You get slapped with a roughly $180,000 development charge.
And it's not And it's not because of like ill intent from architects, but most people don't know how to do this. You know, I was working with a client recently. They had purchased a property. You know, they love their architect because they're building a personal residence with this architect, and it's a beautiful personal residence. But they wanted to use them for multifamily, and their architect was telling them that there's absolutely no way you have to pay 200,000 in development charges. And we know we've done so many of these properties without paying development charges. So most people don't know how to navigate this process properly. Even amongst architects, it's a very, very small percentage. I would say that between me, Matt, Sam, and Ed, we probably know all the architects in Toronto that can do this properly, because it's only a handful. So
Yeah.
you know, it's not because these architects they just don't know any better, because this is not their specialty.
Yeah, we have one of our clients, Daniel Wang, loves to tell the story of a guy on his road. So he bought a property down the road from him is a guy who got slapped with development charges, going from a single family to a triplex, and Daniel is working with us and avoiding those development charges. So yeah, people are getting slapped with them. This is a real thing. Anything else you want to talk, or any other questions? Actually, there's a Matt C here who DM'd us, but it's a good question, so I hope he doesn't mind, but I'm going to share it with everyone. He asked us directly, do you put all of your triplex mechanicals in your duplex drawings? Is it transparent to the inspector?
So so there's a couple of questions in that question. Do we put all the mechanicals on the permit set? No, because we're not going for a triplex immediately, right? So our mechanicals are only drawn out for the units that we're going for. The other units are empty, right? They're just rooms, right? There is empty space though left for mechanicals. Do we tell the inspector? Absolutely. Like from day one, it's, hey, Mr. Inspector, this is our plan, right? This is what we're trying to do. Please evaluate us as if we were a multifamily. And this is very key, because I don't want him to evaluate me like I'm a duplex, because then he's not looking at fire separation that's required between the additional unit that's coming on later, right? He's only going to look at fire separation required for a duplex. And then if I go to put in my third unit afterwards, and then he comes back and he's like, wait, you are missing fire separation, or I don't like the way that you guys did this, I got to tear it down and do it all over again. So it's really important at the beginning of the inspection process to develop a good relationship with that inspector and be transparent as to what you're up to. Remember, you're not doing anything illegal here. This is correct. And you know, we tell our inspectors we're doing it as a duplex, and then we're going to close that duplex permit, and then we're going to open up one for a triplex, and we're going to close that, and we're going to open up one for fourplex, and have them be advocates for you through that process rather than the other way around.
Yeah, so everything's above board. We're not doing anything illegal. We're not doing anything shady. We're just doing things better.
I like the way that sounds, Matt.
Oh, yeah? TM.
TM.
Are you done with this, or is there more that you want to talk about?
I'm done. That's it. I'm done for the year.
You're done? You're done? Mic drop?
Yeah. Mic drop.
Okay, might as well just do a George Costanza and end on a high note, huh?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. I threw this in. I don't think anyone on the team knew I was going to do this, but I'm going to do it anyway. Okay, so I was talking about how fourplex conversions are very difficult. They're fraught with failure. There's lots of failure points. There's lots of problems you could run into. How many people saw this article? This is a Toronto Star article. Yeah, Shelby saw it because I sent it to her. She's raising her hand. I'm like, yeah, I know, dude. This article, so I don't know. No one's turned the video on, so how the hell am I supposed to know if you're raising your hand or not? I'm just going to talk anyway. How about that? This article talked about, it was only a couple of days ago. It talked about this guy, this developer who was going to turn a single family home into two fourplexes, two triplexes with laneway suites. So this is, the headline was wrong. This is written by a reporter. What can you expect?
They're the worst.
But anyway, two triplexes with laneway suites, so 4 units total, right? Times 2. They were taking, basically, this is at Main and Gerard, and they're doing it's a 50-foot lot. They're doing a severance and building. They're tearing down the old house. It's a detached house with an upper unit and a lower unit. Tearing that down, and there was tenants there in the upper and lower suites, and then they're severing and building 2 semis. And each semi was a triplex, and then building 2 laneway houses. So 8 units total. A very ambitious project. And I wish this guy all the best, because I want to see him succeed. Anyone who can pave this way makes it easier for the rest of us. Now, but the reason I want to bring this up is because I want to talk about the difference between what he's doing and what we're doing and what we're talking about, right? So a couple of things. He's approaching this, he bought an existing house with tenants. So I would say that is, I'm not going to say that's the first wrong move. I'm not going to use the word wrong. That's the first difference. And we all know how difficult it can be, and how much, how the tenants have rights to maintain residence in their existing dwelling. So that's going to be the first challenge. And whether he might be able to do this legitimately, but it's going to be, either way, it's more painful. In fact, tenants can be the biggest hurdle, or can be, sorry, I think I say biggest. It can be one of the biggest hurdles. One of the biggest challenges when you go to undertake this. What's the solution? Either number 1, it's got to be empty already, or number 2, you put it on the seller. You need the seller to incentivize the tenants to get them out, and either way, you're taking vacant possession. If you're not taking vacant possession, you don't want it on you to have to deal with getting the tenants out. Okay, so that's the first difference. Number 2, this guy's doing a land severance. That is a massive undertaking, right? Unto itself, that's a huge undertaking. So he's taking a 50-foot lot, which is a giant lot. He is splitting it into 225. In fact, what he wanted to do, his original plan was to create 3 townhouses. So that would have been 3 units, 3 units, 3 units, plus laneway house, laneway house, laneway house, and it would have been roughly 17-foot frontages per property. So that was even more ambitious, but then they scaled it back once they realized that it was going to be a hard sell. But these guys, they've done a lot of stuff right. Like, they approach city councilors, they've got support. They approach neighbors, and they're, I guess, varied support. The tenants aren't happy, and somehow this made it to news. It's a headline now. They're doing a lot of things that are right, though. They're building the right type of units, 2-bedroom units in the basement and main, 3-bedroom unit on the 2nd and 3rd floor. They're building a 3-bedroom in the laneway. Their rent projections are correct. We've reviewed them. So anywhere from like 2,500 to 3,000 for the 2-bedroom units, and anywhere from upward to 3,500 for 3-bedroom units. So their rent projections are pretty good. Where I would say, again, I'm not going to say wrong. I'm just going to say different. I would consider the area that they've chose to do this in is suboptimal area. Main and Gerard, for all the time and energy and money that they're going to plunk in, there's no proof of concept. So that far out from the city, from the downtown core. The only exception is probably going to be maybe beaches. Beaches is a great area, but out towards Main and Gerard, there aren't going to be a lot of proof of concepts for 3 million plus type of properties like this, right? In the multi-family space. So that's not an area that I would have done this in. So I think he's going to run into additional challenges because of that on the ARV, right? But that said, these guys, they've done a lot of good stuff. They have, they chose the properties that have the right zoning already, and a very flexible residential zone because it was R zoned. So the zoning allowed what they wanted to do. What else do these guys do? I'm trying to quickly go through the article. They're using a planner. So they have an architect, they have a planner on board. So these guys are doing a lot of good stuff. I wish them all the success in the world. I hope that they are going to be successful with their application. So they're only applying to the COA now. And I hope it works out for them. But I wanted to just point out some differences between what we're proposing and what these guys are going to do, because I think these guys are in for a world of hurt, and they're going to have they're going to run into challenges that we're not necessarily run into. One of the biggest ones as well, because they're tearing down the existing house and rebuilding, they're rebuilding new. So they're subject to a new build, the building code for new builds, not for existing houses. So even if we were taking existing house and doing an extension or a top up, that's different than a new build. So the building code is going to be slightly different. Was there anything else I missed, Ming or Ed or Sam or Shelby?
No, I think that's the main of it. I just looking at the time, we're at 8:58, and I know we want to run through financials for everybody so they can understand.
Crap, we're already at the end.
Kind of what the financials are like.
Okay, well, I still got a little bit to go. Hope you guys don't mind. Give me 15 minutes. If you need to leave. We'll post this later, maybe. No, just stick around. Just in case we don't post it. Okay, how part 3. So we've been to part 2 for a while. Part 3, how much specifically, high level financials. Okay, if we purchase something like this for 1.5 and we did a massive reno, so it's 950. There's lots and lots of numbers here. The point here is the total cost for the project is going to be about 2.5 million, and it's going to require about 1.3, 1.4 million in cash. Okay. The ARV right now, we estimate one of these things to be about 3 million after we're done the renovation. Today, at the time of the refi, we expect this to take about 16 months. And in 16 months, according to a 5% growth rate, it comes out to about 3.2 million. So we expect it to be, when we're done, about 3.2 million, even though it's worth 3 million today. Because there's the forced depreciation that because of change of use, because of the renovations and all that stuff, and time value depreciation because the market's continuing to move. If we say, so originally with a $1.5 million purchase, this is just a subset of the financials. I just wanted to give you a quick snapshot. With a $1.5 million purchase price, that means an 80% loan to value mortgage. It's a $1.2 million mortgage originally. And if you have the mortgage qualification for a $3.2 million property, and assuming you can get 80% loan to value, there's lots of reasons why you might not be able to. I know we have a mortgage broker on this call. You'd need a hell of a lot of exceptions, let's just say, to get to that point. But can you get to 75% LTV? Probably, in a worst case scenario. But anyway, I've modeled it just as 80%. With normal residential financing, just to show you what it looks like. If we pay out the existing mortgage, so the existing mortgage is 1.2, but after 16 months, it's been paid down a little bit to 1.16, and we do an equity takeout of about 1.4 because of our new mortgage of 2.56 and our old mortgage of 1.1. We do an equity takeout of about 1.4. Our initial investment was 1.4. That means our net investment is almost zero. Like, I don't know if you're following what I'm saying, and I don't really have that much time to, kind of baby step you through this. But the point is that you can, in theory, in practice might be different, but in theory, you can raise the property value high enough to actually take out not only your renovation dollars, but maybe even a good chunk or maybe all of your down payment and closing costs. So this is pretty
essentially buying a property that's worth $3.2 million for $5,000, right?
Something like that, yeah.
It takes a year and a half of time, and you need the capital and mortgage qualification. But out of pocket, you're able to refinance like this.
Yeah, it'll cost you. It'll cost you
Your soul.
your soul and 5 years of your life. And I'm talking, it's going to reduce your lifespan by 5 years. Not that it's going to take 5 years. Like there's a lot to this. Like don't take this lightly. This is a lot of work and takes a lot of expertise. But I'm just showing you what it could do. So if you look at the weighted, so the way that we look at it is, okay, it was 16 months at the high number, which is like 1.4 million. And then 4 more years you hold it for at the lower number, which is $5,000. You get a weighted net investment. And that's what you calculate your ROI on, right? So the total cost of the project here, I'll just move on. Total cost of the project was 2.56. The after repaired value if completed today was 3 million. Like I said, the ARV at the time of completion in 16 months is 3.2. So the total capital appreciation at the time of completion, partly due to forced appreciation, partly due to time value appreciation, but it's roughly in the $600,000 range, right? Not bad at all, right? And then, like Ed said, for something like this, you're in the $12,000 to $13,000 range in rents. And how that breaks down is you'll have a second and third floor unit, two bath, that will rent for roughly $3,600. You'll have a main floor 2-bedroom, 1 bath. That'll probably rent for about $2,600 to $2,800. You'll have a basement unit, 2-bedroom, 1 bath, but probably underpinned with 8-foot ceilings. That will probably rent in $2,400 to $2,500 range, maybe even $26. And then you have a laneway house, this massive 3-bedroom, 2-bath, bi-level suite, amazing, very, very large. That will be $3,800, but probably upwards of $4,000. Probably anywhere from $4,000 to $4,000 is still not unreasonable. But you have to remember, we're breaking new ground here. This is not an established business model insofar as I can point to, a dozen of them and go, oh, okay, yeah, this is exactly how it works. This doesn't exist. We're breaking new ground here. Triplexes, they exist all over the place. Fourplexes, 400 units under one building, yes. My caveat is that we're talking about the business model with the laneway house here. 4 units under one building, yeah, those exist. But laneways are new. There's not an established business model, so a lot of these are projections based on our expertise. Okay. Okay, so monthly expenses, roughly about $1,000. Your mortgage after your refi is going to be about $10,000 a month. So even after you've pulled out all your freaking money, you're still cash flowing positive on this thing. It's insane. It's a very, very lucrative business model. Like I said, the numbers are high, but the returns are even higher. The cash required is massive, but the ROI far exceeds that. So that's why it's the natural evolution of our existing business model where we were talking about, duplexes and triplexes, and then triplex conversion, now fourplex conversion. And again, this fourplex conversion may even be a 5-plex conversion, 6-plex conversion. There's actually no artificial ceiling to what it is that you can create. I can't, are you going to go into like 8, 10, 12? 4, 5, 6 is probably kind of going to be sort of that sweet spot. The issue is going to be more around whether you're allowed to do it or not, and whether you're going to get the approvals to. So technically, you maybe could. It adheres to the zoning, and we think we can put together a pretty strong case. But ultimately, you may need to go to committee of adjustments, and you might run into neighbor resistance. But again, so now what? Why now? What now, Ming?
Get a hold of us, right? We are often asked, like, it's probably one of the number one questions we get. What's the one thing that separates those who are successful in real estate investing and those who aren't? And the answer is clear. It's action taking. The nice thing about real estate is the actions don't even have to be 100% correct all the time, but you just need to do something. That can start off with just a conversation with us. So you can email us at Volition, info@volitionprop.com. If you have questions, you want to set up a conversation, you want to talk about advisory, like your own individual plan, you're interested in this LP that we're talking about. I encourage everybody to do something. It doesn't have to be with us. Hopefully it is. But even if it's reaching out to somebody else that that is investing to get more information about it, just to take action. Because if you're just passive in the process, you get nowhere, right? Next slide, please.
Yeah. And so this advisory is really, this is free. This is complimentary. Take advantage of it. This is, part of it is going to be, do you think we can work together? Because we can't work with everyone. If we can't help you, we'll tell you. Or if we think that your goals don't align with what it is that we think we can help you achieve, we'll tell you. Because there's no sense in us working together if we can't make you guys successful. And so this is really just an intro. This is a sit down. This is a nice feeling each other out, sort of like a first date. But as the relationship deepens, and how it deepens is...
Okay, I'm going back on the call. Okay, sorry. I just have to do this.
Okay, Ling Chung, putting you on mute. Yeah, so what we'll do is, for us to deepen our relationship, we'll be under retainer by you. And when you're under retainer, you are one of our clients, then we're committed to you, committed to your success. And that's when you have access to, for example, our WhatsApp Volition Mastermind chat. Right, so you'll get a plethora of resources and networking opportunities and what have you. So we like to provide all these resources for you, and the first step to accessing all of that and all these resources and all this networking and our preferred vendor list and everything is by reaching out to us. Complimentary advisory